Hi, and welcome to this episode of Chickens and Chatter. Today, I want to talk about buying hatching eggs and specifically shipping hatching eggs. So we have a lot of experience with this. So some people might ask, why would you have eggs shipped? And for me, I mean, I bought my first chicks from Tractor Supply, and that's how I started. Then as I was looking into different breeds and all that, I thought about hatching them myself. So a friend of mine has a farm and she had fertile eggs. So they were just some barnyard mixes, and I figured I'd give it a try. So ultimately I wanted death layers, but there were none local. So I decided to try hatching the local eggs first to see how that went, and it went very well. So then I moved on to getting shipped eggs, and I can tell you it's been quite an experience. But there's a lot of risks when it comes to buying and shipping hatching eggs. And one, like, different the temperature exposure to a lot of temperature changes. The biggest one is the handling. Once the eggs are shipped and they're in the mail, they're at the mercy of the mail carrier, and you never know what's going to happen with them there. So there's potentially a lot of damage. Shipping delays, I've had that happen too. Poor packaging, that's another one. I will share some slides, so if you want to see kind of a picture version of some of the experiences. As far as the packaging, I've gotten probably altogether, I've probably had about 80 shipped eggs, and each came packed differently. I've never had a set of eggs come. They've all come from different places, different breeders, but none of them have ever been packed the same. Some were packed a lot better than others. Another big problem is you might have, infertile, the eggs might not be fertilized. That was a big one with some death layers that I got not that long ago. Not one single egg was fertile. And I reached back out to the breeder and they just never responded. And unfortunately, when you do order shipped eggs, there's no guarantee. They tell you that right off the bat. So, potentially you could have an issue with having unfertilized eggs, and they're just duds. And so I've had that happen. And typically you're going to expect a lot lower hatch rate. The numbers vary. I've done really well with some, and others I have not done well at all. And the other is the eggs potentially can carry diseases depending on where they come, where they come from. That's a possibility too. One of the big things I always look to see that the eggs are from an NPIP farm, and having that certification is important. Not to mention, especially, I don't know all the states, but here they're not supposed to ship eggs into or out of the state without having the NPIP certification. Now, nobody checks. I did not know that when I very first started, and I did get some death layer eggs that were not. But I did later on go on to get NPIP certified. So the babies that hatched were tested and everything was fine. But that is a potential problem if you get eggs from a breeder that might not be reputable, or you just don't know. But so, I mean, one of the most important things, and that goes right into that, is choosing a reputable breeder. And you definitely want to do your research. You want to look into their practices, their flocks. You have a list of questions, which I'm happy to share. If anybody is interested in the list of questions that I recommend that you ask a breeder, just reach out and I'm happy to send it to you. But again, that's where the biosecurity part comes in. You want to know what their practices are, and you want to make sure they have a clean flock. You also want to understand their breeding goals, because if you are looking for a specific breed, you would hope that that's what they send you, but it's not always the case. So you also want to find out about like the fertility, and also, you know, how long have they had the eggs? If they only have 2 hens and, you know, that are laying that breed, and you order a dozen eggs, those eggs are not, there's some that are going to be quite old by the time they get there. So, you know, there's just a lot of questions that you want to ask. And, you know, especially if you're spending all that money to buy the eggs and have them shipped to you. So I just want to, let's pull my slide up here. Um, so these were some eggs that I had. And so I wanted death layers, and the breeder unfortunately did not have enough to meet the amount that they were advertising. So I found these on eBay, and, you know, because trying to find, again, the death layer breeder was hard. So so she just said, well, I can throw some other eggs in there. So that's what ended up happening. And I got the death layers, and of those, 0 hatched. So none. The Brahmas, which I didn't particularly, I love the breed, but they're a larger breed, and I'm have smaller breeds. So I just figured, okay, you know, I'll sell them or give them to somebody, but, you know, I'll take them. And of those, 3 hatched, and they were nice, I have to say. Pita Pinta, and I had several eggs. Only one of the Pita Pintas hatched, and then the Samanis, which none hatched. So I ended up with 4 from all these eggs. Only 4 hatched. And out of all the breeds I wanted, I did not get the death layer. I ended up, I will say, falling in love with the Pita Pintas, and I do now have more Pita Pintas. So on the next slide, so these are the eggs. This is the way that they were shipped, and, you know, in that box. But you can see here, so they took one of those, like, I don't know, swimmy floating things that you use for the swimming pool, and the eggs were put in there. These were probably the worst packed eggs I received. It was very hot. It was summer, and there was a delay. And when I got them, 1 egg had broken, and the breeder did confirm that it was a death layer egg that had broken, that she was having a problem with soft shells. So honestly, these probably should not have been shipped to me, because you know, if you have soft shells, things are just not going on quite right, and potentially they're going to break. And in the heat, when I opened that box, it was disgusting. So these were probably the worst packed, and the only time I've ever received a broken egg. Here's more pictures of just the way that that they were packed, and you could see. And these, I think, came from the Carolinas. I'm not sure. I think it was Carolina or Ohio. But, and then these are how my silver Lake and Velders came. So each one was wrapped individually, and they came, it was filled with sawdust, and the eggs were just buried in the sawdust. It was packed really tight, and that was packed very nice, no issues whatsoever. None of the eggs broke. This is the typical label that you'll find when the eggs are shipped, so that the post office and anybody can recognize the fact that, you know, you have live embryos. So here again are the Lake and Velders. Now I will, so to this, if you see, some of the eggs had LV written on it. I ordered Lake and Velder eggs, and typically the breeder will throw in some extra eggs. So there were some that had SP, and I figured those were extra spare. I had no idea what SP. They didn't tell me anything. So, you know, so I thought I had Lake and Velders. But I have a story to go with that in a few minutes. With the Lake and Velders, I also got more death layers. So None of the death layers were packed nicely. As you could see, I mean, none of them broke, and they were in this kind of styrofoam with each egg in its own little compartment. And again, none broke. My last eggs, these were my pita pintas, these are the last batch that I have had shipped to me. These were packed the nicest. They came in a double box. So you had the big box and there were peanuts, and then inside was another smaller box, and the eggs were packed in there like that. And again, these eggs were packed very nice, none broke, and we probably had the best hatch rate with those. Here was one of the eggs when I was candling that was not fertile. And here was one that you can see the Lakenvelder. It's a little hard to see in the picture, but it is a developing egg. So for me, for my shipped eggs, I use my Innovator incubator. This has the eggs standing up and rotates them back and forth instead of turning them, because when you have shipped eggs, a lot of times that air cell will detach. And by having them standing instead of rolling, it does give the air cell a chance to stabilize. And you know, this is how I hatch all of my shipped eggs. I use this incubator for that reason. When it comes down time for lockdown, then I do move them into smaller incubators. I have several. If I have multiple breeds in there, I split up the breeds and put them in the smaller incubators because, you know, there's too many to, I could let them hatch in this, but I typically have some scattered out would be. So some are going to go into lockdown, and then might be 3 days later more. So because of that, I use multiple incubators, but this is my primary one. And you could see here is one of the developing eggs. And my grandson was absolutely thrilled just at watching the chicks and helping me candle the eggs. So these were my Lakenvelders. Now I have to say, out of all my eggs, these were the dirtiest. Typically, my eggs are really clean when I get them from the breeder, but there had been a lot of rain. These are from Texas, and been a lot of rain, and there was mud. I wiped them off a little bit, but I just kind of left them alone. This breeder is MPIP certified, so you know, I knew they'd been tested, and I had talked to the breeder a little bit, so yeah, I was comfortable with that. But typically, the eggs are cleaner. So the story with these eggs, I ordered silver Lakenvelders, and that's what I thought I was getting. About 2 weeks old or so, some of the chicks started looking different, and they had like a crest. And I'm like, these do not look like a Lakenvelder. I had no idea. So I reached out to the breeder. First, they told me I must have gotten the eggs mixed up, that I have Lakenvelders. And so I was like, no, I know I didn't mess up the eggs because I'm very careful with that. And the only eggs these were in with were the death layers. And I knew none of these were death layers, and none of the death layers hatched. So I knew they came from the same group. I sent the breeder a picture, and they said, the Appenzeller Spitzhaben. So what happened was, they didn't tell me they threw a different breed in here. And typically it'll be a similar breed. Now the Appenzeller Spitzhabens are not similar to the Lakenvelders. As chicks, they look alike, but they are pretty different. So it was not a breed I expected or was prepared for. I almost didn't keep them. And I actually sold 2 because when it was a really good hatch rate with these guys, and I had more than I wanted. So a friend of mine was looking for some different chicks. And so he bought 2, and he ended up with 1 Lakenvelder and 1 of the Spitzhabens. And I have 2 Lakenvelders and then 2 of the Spitzhabens. And the 2 I kept, 1 is a rooster and 1 is a pullet. So I figure I'm just going to give it a shot and see what happens, and see if I can get some more, because I've actually grown to love these little guys. Again, I wasn't planning on them. I'd never even heard of the breed. So as kind of a lesson learned when you are buying eggs. You don't always know what you get. You hope it's what you expected, but there is a chance that it might not be. Now, my next, okay, so this is one of my pita pintas, and this was my very first pita pinta, which was my first experience with them. Again, back then I was trying to get death layers. I didn't want a pita pinta. I didn't know anything about them, but the breeder had them and said, I can give you some eggs. And so one hatched, and this is Mr. Melody. The problem with Mr. Melody is the pita pintas are supposed to either be brown and white or black and white. He is brown, black and white. There was a lot of debate. As he started as a baby, he was only black and white. He looked completely like a normal pita pinta. As he got older and the brown appeared, I started questioning, like, is he really a pita pinta? And I still don't know for sure. The breeder guarantees that it is a pita pinta. She had him in a mixed colored flock, which the actual other breeders I spoke to said no one in their right mind would do that, that you keep the black and white in one flock and the brown and white in another. You just don't mix them. So he has all the characteristics of a pita pinta. So I really do believe that he is. He's just from a mixed flock, and it's something that you typically would never do. But again, I had no idea. I wasn't planning on the breed. So, I mean, I love him anyway, even with his brown. I think he's beautiful, and he's a very sweet rooster, and he's worked out well. I decided that because he was such an even-tempered rooster and just a really pleasant chicken, that I wanted to get more pita pintas. So I do now have 4 pullets, the black and white, they're correct, and another rooster that's black and white, and that's also correct. So I'm still keeping Melody, but I will, when they're ready next year, breed the pita pintas. But it's one of those things that, if you're looking for a specific breed, those are questions you need to ask. You want to make sure that they're not in a mixed flock, because, if you're getting shipped eggs and you're paying a good price for them and you expect a certain breed, there's a good chance, if they're not separate, that you could get something else. And I see that a lot with the Samanis, part of a Samani group I'm in, that people will order, even the chicks or hatching eggs, and they don't turn out to be full Samanis. They're definitely mixed with something. So it's one of those things that you really want to be careful about, because in the end, you're just not sure. So I don't regret getting my shipped eggs. Well, acorns or something are falling. I don't regret my shipped eggs at all. Although I will tell you that, you have to expect things to not go quite as well as they would if you had, your own eggs versus having eggs shipped. I went through a whole lot, and I will say a whole lot. And, my normal hatch rate is like 95% with the shipped eggs. I'm not even sure at this point what it is, because, like I said, I've had a few that just none hatched. They weren't fertilized, and so it wasn't even that anything I could have done, and and then you have just the damage. Every single one that I have, always the air cells always been detached. You can tell when you candle them when you first get them to check for cracks. And, you do your best, and, do research on the best way to hatch shipped eggs. People have different ways that they do it. Again, I just, when I get them from the box and I open them up, I leave them on the counter for 12 to 24 hours so they can settle and get to room temperature. If depending on where they're coming from, they could go through all kinds of temperatures. and they've been shaken up and rattled around a lot. So give them a chance to settle. I prefer to incubate them where they are standing, like standing up, and they tilt back and forth, because it does give the air cell some time to stabilize. And then when they're ready to go into lockdown, they go in their side just like regular egg, and everything's the same. But it's just one of those. There's risks involved. Be prepared. It could get expensive depending on what kind of chicken, what breed you're looking for. But sometimes if you want a specific breed, it is the only way that you can find them. And I'll keep doing it if I need to, but I'm very happy with the diversity of my flock right now. And I think I finally have the core group that I need. And so hopefully the only eggs I'll be hatching anymore right now are my own and not shipped ones. But again, if you are interested in some of the questions that I recommend you ask, just reach out to me, send me an email, or send me a message, find me on Facebook, and I'm happy to send you the sheet with questions. And you just want to ask the right questions, because nothing's more frustrating than investing money into something and then either not getting what you expected, or having unfertilized eggs. And sometimes not getting what you expected does turn out well, like my Spitzhabens, which again, I absolutely fell in love with that breed. Everybody who comes over is just fascinated with them. Locally, I don't know anybody who has them. Um, I've talked to some people who do, but around here, they're not a common breed. So it's pretty cool that I have them, and everybody just loves them. And my kids and friends, they help me. Their names are Cosmo and Kramer, because with the crest, they just, you could understand the name's very fitting. But anyway, well, that was this week's episode of Chickens and Chatter. Wanted to share some of my experience with the hatching eggs, and anybody who's looking to buy some shipped hatching eggs, if you have questions or you want my list of questions, I'm very, very happy to share them with you. And hopefully, if all goes well, I do plan to ship eggs next year. So we'll keep an eye out and see if that works out. And maybe I'll have some shipped eggs available for wherever you are. Anyway, thank you and bye.